Tonight, a federal budget the Liberals are calling generational.
Quebec's doctors warn they are being threatened and silenced under new provincial laws.
And checking a thrilling CFL playoff race plus the World Series wrap up. From Montreal, I'm Eddie Tekalik.
And I'm Gary MacDonald. This is episode 58 of Night Talk Canada, honest, unfiltered Canadian, the conversation we should be having. And we want you to be a part of tonight's conversation. Share your opinions in the comments. Now, let's get busy. The Carney Liberals have tabled their first budget. It is a plan billed as Building Canada Strong, but timed amid global trade headwinds and domestic cost pressures. Big promises, big deficits, and big questions. What's really in it for Canadians, and how will the government pay for it? That's a big one. Let's have a look at some of the talk and reaction on the Hill yesterday, and then we'll dive into the highlights. First, Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne.
Prime Minister Carney was elected having a bold mandate to bring change, to do big things in this country, and Budget 2025 will deliver on that. Today, we're delivering an investment budget, the kind of budget that will make Canada more resilient, more prosperous, that will make Canada the strongest economy in the G7. We are going to be making generational investments to build Canada strong, from coast to coast to coast. This is a plan to build major infrastructure. This is a plan to build homes. This is a plan to build industries that will grow our economy and create lasting prosperity. This is a plan that will protect our communities, our borders, our way of life here in Canada. This is a plan to empower Canadians like never before, with better careers, strong public services, and clearly a more affordable life. So our Buy Canadian strategy will make sure that, Canadian suppliers always, whenever possible, full stop. Our new productivity super deduction, I'm sure you've seen that in the budget by now, will make it easier for businesses to invest in new machinery and equipment and technologies. This is a message to all the entrepreneurs, the startups, the businesses across this country. Canada will be the most competitive country, and we are making sure that we empower you to do that. This gives Canada a competitive advantage over the United States, encouraging business investments across our nation. At the same time, our new trade diversification strategy, which is going to be supported by a Trade Diversification Corridors Fund, will expand Canada's reach and double our overseas exports within a decade. This is quite important. This is about resilience. This is at making sure that we reach new market together. This is giving a chance to every exporter in our country. This will unlock $300 billion in new opportunities for Canadian workers and businesses. This is us giving us the means of our ambition, making sure we reach this market, making sure we export more, making sure that we bring the made in Canada products around the world.
There's complex issues that are facing us, and I don't think that we can oversimplify whether policies are going to respond or not. So I'll tell you a few things that we like about the budget. There's $51 billion in infrastructure spending, and that's linked to unionized jobs or community benefit agreements, which requires that work to be done through wage prevailing rates. So that could create good family-sustaining jobs, which has been a priority for the NDP. We talked about, campaigned on, an east-west clean electricity grid. That's mentioned on page 1 of the budget. And there's a specific mention of co-op housing, something that is near and dear to New Democrat hearts and something that we push for all the time. Some of you, none of you look old enough, but the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation was our predecessor, so co-ops are built into the DNA of the NDP. That's in there. On the negative side, you have 40,000 public sector job cuts. And when you have a jobs crisis, cutting union, family-sustaining, good jobs is the opposite direction of where we want to go. And we have to remember, behind every job is a service. Do Canadians really want to wait 6 months to get a passport? You want to wait 3 months to get a call back from CRA? The seniors want to wait to get their old age security checks? These are the kind of real life consequences of cutting public sector workers there are. I would also point out that Mr. Carney promised Canadians during the election that he would cap the public sector, not cut it. Second, they canceled the unused housing tax, which was a measure to stop particularly foreign investors from buying housing in Canada and leaving them vacant. So by taxing it, it was driving those units into the housing supply, providing homes for people. Inexplicably, this government has removed that tax, meaning that we're going to go in the opposite direction, and you'll see those housing units taken out of the housing supply. We think that's wrong as well. And there's no digital services tax. This was a measure that the Liberals themselves invented 5 years ago, worked on. It would raise $1 billion a year in revenue, taxing the biggest U.S. tech companies in the world. We're talking Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, on profits over $20 million in Canada. Now, if you have a revenue problem in Canada and you have to cut public services, or you could tax the wealthiest people on the planet, NDP thinks that it would have been a wiser choice to tax those people. So you see there's positive and negatives in this budget, and we're going to take a comprehensive look and weigh it out in the aggregate over the next few days.
Now, Davis also had the best line of the day, in my humble opinion, in response to a question from CTV's Power Play host Vashi Kapelas.
Yeah, well, that's why I like a budget that satisfies Canadians, not one that satisfies Donald Trump.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
That was the line of the day for me. Anyhow, moving along, and there was a little bit of humor in this one as well. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet says, it's a hard no for the support of the budget.
I hardly see how, after having met with our caucus tonight, we could vote in favor of this budget. Those $78 billion of deficit, whatever tricks they want to invent. There's nothing of what we did ask in the budget. And I must tell you that what the Bloc Québécois asked in order to maybe support the budget about elders, about healthcare transfers, about what we did ask, but one thing that was not given to Quebecers and given to everybody else would have been good for all Canadians, not only Quebecers. Still, the answer is no. This is a red conservative budget, which Mr. Harper might have signed. And there's nothing for Quebecers in there, absolutely nothing. We did ask what was basically the object of a large consensus within the population of Quebec. And the answer from a Quebecer, Mr. Champagne, is a blunt no.
The Liberals are trying to approach anyone from your party to cross the floor?
I'd be quite surprised. We are about as close to Liberals as Quebec is from New Zealand. It's the other side of the world.
Wow,
He always comes up with a line.
Yeah, that's a heavy statement.
Is it ever? I couldn't help but notice as well the two people standing behind him, especially the guy. He started cracking up as soon as the reporter finished that question.
Yeah.
Anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can understand all the minister's frustrations as outlined in the three clips that you just played, but there's two that hit home. That last statement by Blanchet, where he's saying, the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals are as far apart as Canada and New Zealand. You know what? I get his message, but I think that was a little harsh, to tell you the truth. That was a little much. And there had been conversations across the floor in order to get support from the Bloc Québécois that, of course, Blanchet's never going to admit to. And the second
Yeah,
one
for
was,
sure.
and the second one that was really interesting was exactly your favorite, when there was reference drawn that this is being done for to appease Donald Trump. And this is exactly what you said. I don't know how many episodes in a row that you were upset by that, and that was exactly it. I think we agree that the prime minister was throwing some kind of a bone over to the orange man down south in order to be able to maybe get conversations going, or it's like putting a souse into a baby's mouth while it's crying to pacify it. I don't know, but you know what? At this particular point in time, yeah, that's exactly what happened. It was done to appease President Trump. That's just the way it goes, and that's just the way that countries have to learn how to negotiate with the guy.
Yeah, really. And then whatever you negotiate only stands for as long as the cheese stays on the cracker, as Doug Ford would say.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, let's. We still have a couple of more, so let's keep rolling.
Okay.
Green Party leader Elizabeth May. Well, she is hoping some compromise can be struck.
I want to make it clear that I am specifically asking the Prime Minister to think about the fact that he's not the CEO of a company called Canada. He's the Prime Minister of this country with a minority government. Now is the time to reach out to those of us in opposition parties who could vote for the budget if in negotiations over the next few days we see changes. That's a possibility. It's a real possibility. The vote will be very tight. When we crunch the numbers, it's too close for comfort. And this is the time for a Prime Minister, and I really ask him personally to meet, to sit down and talk and find the changes that could be made to where we could cast our one vote in favor of the budget. But that moment is not now.
Now, the Conservatives have drawn a line in the sand, and during Monday's question period, leader Pierre Poilievre was clear, very clear on where he stood.
Mr. Speaker, tomorrow will be the 10th costly Liberal budget after they doubled housing costs, doubled food bank lineups, and doubled the national debt. Now they're making exactly the same costly promises. And the Prime Minister says Canadians who can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves need to make more, quote, sacrifices. The choice for us is simple. If a budget brings down the cost of living, we'll support it. If it brings up the cost of living, just like every other Liberal budget, we will vote no. So instead of trying to provoke a costly election on a costly budget, why not an affordable budget for an affordable life?
And of course, today when he was in the House, he basically said the same thing again. And yesterday, he had various heavy hitters in the Conservative caucus go out and continue to echo that they would be voting against the budget.
And in the chaos of budget day, Gary, the Liberals scored a new member. Nova Scotia Conservative MP Chris D'Entremont announced he was leaving the Conservative caucus and joining the Liberals, a move that leaves the Carney Liberals only 2 votes short of a majority government and closer to having the budget pass.
So let's have a look at some of the key details of the Carney generational budget. And for that, we'll just head over here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to do this. Okay, so $141 billion in new spending, billion with a B.
Right.
$51 billion in program cuts and savings. $78 billion deficit forecast for the next fiscal year. And apparently some economists thought it was going to be even higher, but
Right.
They brought it in at $78 billion, which is up from the last one in the last year's fall statement, economic statement, that was tabled in December, was 63 million in that range. So he's outdone Justin. $56.6 billion deficit goal by fiscal 2029-30. So what they're saying is, and what I gleaned from the finance minister yesterday in some of the interviews I watched, they're working to bring the deficit down, and it's going to be accomplished by what they're calling investment spending. That's why at this end of it right now, $141 billion in new spending, but they're looking on that as investment spending that's going to start returning some savings along with some other cuts that we'll get into in a moment, and achieved by balancing the operating budget versus revenues by 2028-2029 while still borrowing for capital investment. In other words, Carney's doing what happens in the private sector, Eddie, as we both know. You've got your operating budget and you have your capital budget. And the operating budget is your day-to-day operation guideline financially, and your capital budget is what you need for borrowing and financing major purchases and what have you. So that's that aspect of it. And then we also have this. It includes major tax cut for capital investments to boost productivity, making corporate tax rate the lowest in the G7. And what he's hoping is, what I understand is that instead of kind of putting off some of the purchases for new equipment and expansion, that companies with this capital investments tax cut, and you know how you would depreciate it over a 5-year period? Well, apparently they're going to accelerate that, so you'll get it up front instead of having to depreciate it over the 5 years. So they're hoping to spur some internal buying that way within our country. 40,000 public sector jobs to be cut by the end of the 2028-29 fiscal year. And the unions responded today, and they're not happy, as you well expect. And what they're saying is, one union leader I watched said, we tried this a number of years ago, and every time you try it, you fall farther behind as far as providing service to the people who need it. And that essentially that's what they're saying. They're saying like, well, we had a hard time providing services during the pandemic. They hired more people, and they still
a lot more people.
Yeah, and they still couldn't get a passport to you inside of a week, 10 days. So I understand, but I'm not buying into it. And the way I understood it, and I could be wrong, and if somebody knows differently, please, by all means, tell me, let me know. I was under the impression that the largest percentage of people hired during the pandemic were hired on a temporary basis, period. So that, they were casual employees and or contract, whatever the term is that they use within the federal government now, contract employees. But as things started to bounce back to normal after the pandemic, and the level of governance being what it is or was at that time during that decade, no one paid any attention to it.
No,
so these workers just kept on going. Yeah. Maybe Trudeau didn't want to be known for cutting all of these people that he hired, but the big tech companies went through a wave of that because they overhired during the pandemic to meet the demand at the time. And then they had to start shedding once things, came back to normal. So anyway, I understand where the unions are coming from, and they're trying to protect their membership. But really, to me, the key performance indicators tell me that we're overstaffed and underproductive still. So that's where I stand on that one. And as I say, if I'm wrong that most of those people hired during the pandemic were hired full-time, permanent, and not on contract or casual, whatever it's termed, then please let me know.
Yeah. Or if we actually see an improvement in the services that Canadian citizens expect, right? And consistently we're not seeing that in a lot of the federal services that are provisioned to us. We had a show on the Revenue Canada, the call center. I mean,
Yep.
when you're waiting for hours, an hour, 50 minutes to an hour and more time than that to actually get a human being on the call. Well, where are those extra people we hired for all of this, right? We talked about this a few shows ago. You mentioned passport offices, 10 days, if you're lucky, 10 days maybe. You might see something in 3 weeks, which is more of a reality. So how have all of these extra bodies improved the services to Canada? And you can't say there has been a higher demand in all these particular areas, right? So at the end of the day, we would have expected to see a better rate of productivity. And quite frankly, Gary, I tend to agree with you. I'm not seeing it, unless I got my eyes closed. I'm just not seeing it.
No, it's just not there. So then we also have $51 billion for infrastructure, an infrastructure program to fast track, your hospitals and transit and port facilities. And then we have $81.8 billion for armed forces over 5 years. Those are some of the real key points. Now, some of the other parts of the budget have already been pre-announced during the various news conferences / announcements that they held in the last month leading up to the budget, especially some of the housing programs. Now, the other thing to point out is that 81 billion for armed forces over 5 years, that brings us up to the 5% of the GDP spending for NATO.
Mm-hmm.
But as former Defense Minister Peter MacKay, I was watching him today, and a couple of retired generals who are on from time to time commenting on these sorts of things. You're not going to get 5 new submarines, put the order in today, and get them next month.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even going to get them next year because there's a process to go through, the finalization of the design for your requirements.
Specific
And
needs,
then
yeah.
in the case of the submarines, they're not even going to be built here. They're going to be built offshore. In a number of years ago, we had a shipyard on the East Coast that had the frigate program and built a facility that was designed to, at that time, also, they were talking about replacing the subs for the Navy at that point. And that's 20 some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, they built a facility that would allow them to build the subs indoors and then launch them. And then, as with the ships themselves, if they needed upgrades or refits, they could just bring them and kind of like on a conveyor belt, bring them inside and work on them inside, and and not be held up by weather or anything else. That's gone now because shipbuilding dried up. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. The military spending, it's on the books, but it's not all going to happen overnight. We're going to end up having to go offshore and buy a lot of the equipment. They're also going to try and buy Canadian first, and we build great armored personnel carriers because they had that deal where they sold a bunch of them to the Saudis, and then they would bring them in. Used to bring them into St. John all wrapped up in white plastic by rail, and then this big Saudi ship would come in, and they would try to be as discreet as possible, loading them onto the ship, and away it would go.
Yeah.
They did get some protesters out for that, but anyhow, I digress. So the budget, generational. I don't know if I'd call it generational. What I'm seeing is Carney's stamp all over it, and the stamp of a banker / business person. I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. Any stretch of the imagination. He's laying out a plan where we're going to catch up after years of neglect in a lot of
Exactly.
areas,
Where we
especially
should
with
have been years
infrastructure.
ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, where we should have
especially
been
with
years ago.
infrastructure. And that's not only the Trudeau decade, but that goes across conservative governments as well. In
Yes, it does.
previous Liberal governments to some point. And I watched a couple of people tonight talking about this too. And a lot of what's in this budget is, like you're looking at a 5-year, 10-year plan overall. Unfortunately, somewhere along the way, the government may change. And when the
Yeah.
government changes, in comes a whole new, instead of like looking at this program and saying, this is pretty decent, it needs to be updated for, 10 years later, 5 years later, it needs to be updated to meet the current situation. But this is a good outline foundation to build upon instead of tearing it all apart and going off in a total direction where you're
Well,
throwing money here, throwing money there, and what's the return on
yeah.
investment?
Well, it's like Elizabeth May said, right? I mean, this is, you shouldn't be thinking of Canada as a CEO, like Carney being the CEO of a country, but you're the prime minister of the country. And I think that's a pretty good, a really nice statement. I like what she was trying to get at. But by the same token, Gary, you know as well as I do, part of corporate strategy, any kind of long-term corporate strategy and goal, it requires very, very strong, consistent leadership to drive that message and drive the entire organization towards those goals if they are indeed long-term. So it's a lot of discipline and a lot of staying on track on the program. And that's fine when you're CEO of a corporation or running a company, with a 5-year plan or a 7-year plan, and then you adjust in the middle as things change around the world from an economy perspective, right? Not so easy to do when you're looking at running a country. I mean, typically speaking, what works against you is, number one, trying to do something long term with a minority government, as Carney is trying to do. And Trudeau tried to do over the last 2 terms, which didn't work out very well in terms of moving the country ahead by leaps and bounds. And then you have the situation where you just said, if the government does change in the middle of a long-term plan and objective, and we're constantly putting new plans into place by replacing old plans, well, you know what happens? Nothing like the last 8 years under the Liberal government. Nothing. So you know what? Minority governments great. You know what? You have the opposition leaders keeping you in check and making sure you're doing what you should be doing to represent the whole country. Got nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. However, there is the issue about governments changing hands every few years, right? Which is a potential risk for us just here in 2025. Aside from apart from running a majority government, at least you have some sort of traction and cohesion for at least 4 years to push some of these budget mandates and projects through. So it's a give and take. So I'm just worried about this being I think a decent long-term plan coming from an economist and banker, which is not a bad thing by any means. But by the same token, under a minority banner, all of this can be thrown out into the garbage and let's start again. So we wasted an entire year, which is what I said a couple of episodes ago. It'd be great if today, with the uncertainty driven in the world economically by the United States, all of it's being the uncertainty driven through the administration in the U.S. for all parties. We talked about the provincial premiers, part of Team Canada with Carney leading the charge. We had said it'd be really nice if all parties of Canada that are represented in the House of Commons to be part of that Team Canada effort to get us through this level of uncertainty until hopefully things change in the world, and primarily in the United States. So yeah, I don't know, Gary. I'm really not looking forward to having an election. Then by the same token, maybe an election wouldn't be a bad thing, which will allow whatever government takes control of the of Parliament to have a 4-year majority mandate, so we can get some of these plans through. And Gary, I don't know about you, but I've got this really loud voice on my shoulder saying, "Get ready for an election at the end of the year." That's what I'm hearing right now. And you know what? That might be exactly what Mr. Carney is looking for. You never know. It sounds like a great budget, but by the same token, I think he's also preparing himself to possibly go into election. And based on what the polling is saying, it may not be a bad idea for him. So who knows? Who knows?
Well, but the polling now, the Liberals, the color on the bloom has faded a bit since the election for the Liberals in general. And so the libs and the cons are neck and neck once again. However, the big difference is Carney, as the preferred prime minister, still has about a 20-point lead over Poilievre.
That's what I'm referring to. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Carney's popularity, is that enough to deliver a majority government this time? All he has to do really is find 2 more disgruntled Tories, or a disgruntled Tory and 1 disgruntled Dipper, and bring them over, and he's got his majority without having to go to the polls. And everybody goes away happy in the long run.
Right.
Because the New Democrats don't want or need another election, and especially before Christmas. Turnout will be low. Will probably be, it'll be one of those winters or Decembers where you get a number of winter storms, which will cut back on turnout. And then after having a federal election at the end of April, and there have been some provincial elections, and then a number of provinces have had municipal elections. There's election fatigue. And at Christmas time, do you remember a few years ago, there was an election campaign, and Harper was involved, the Conservatives. Anyway, it was right around Christmas time, and they paused it, the campaign, for 2 weeks over Christmas into the new year. And was that on a confidence motion at the time? I can't remember now. I'd have to go back and look it up. But it just hit me. But who wants to even think about an election
during the holiday season?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we've got a comment. Let's head out to the West Coast. And Joe, government services are abysmal. And an issue with CRA back in January, they finally got back to me 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago! I could have walked to Ottawa and back in that time. And probably gotten far more satisfaction by doing it, Joe.
You at least would have toured the country, Joe, Wow. That you're talking about 10 months later. Wow.
That's just unreal.
Yeah.
Just unreal. And let me ask you this, Joe. I have to ask, was your issue resolved when they did get back to you 2 weeks ago? Just let us know, yes or no. That would be interesting to find out. There are no words, Eddie. There are no words, just no words. No words
you know
at
what
all.
I mean? The words coming from the union representative. I mean, they make a lot of good points, but at the same time, you got to take them with a grain of salt as well, right? I mean, they're using union representation. They're losing a huge chunk of their revenues. So of course, they're working as a corporation as well. Don't want to lose that kind of money. So you know what? I'm all for unions as long as the unions don't get in the way of running a business and ensuring productivity is there's a certain level of productivity delivered, which in many cases, when it comes out from government entities, we're just not seeing. I mean, we can talk about all kinds of departments. I know we've been picking on the CRA lately, but it's not just one department. It's everything right across the board. So. Yeah, I think you got to look at efficiencies at this particular point, which this particular budget speaks to. Some difficult decisions need to be made, and I'd prefer difficult decisions being made than not, and just letting it roll along until the next administration has to deal with the crap. So I'm glad they're taking a difficult step forward with some of the constriction of jobs within the federal government.
Well, look, government is, in the running of government, is a business.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of business because, yes, your shareholders, you have 40 million shareholders. And we're looking for different levels of return on our investments. So, it's tough that way. And you have to have more compassion than what you do at a corporate level when you're looking at the bottom lines and the bean counters are in and saying, like, boom, 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 this number and this number, and go away, my head is swimming. But it's you still have to have a business basis approach to the running of government. Otherwise, you just keep ending up with these deficits like we have over the last number of years. And I just wish I could run a deficit not quite as large as the federal government, not even as large as the provincial government, but up there, and just kind of go off willy-nilly on different little ideas that I have, the same as they go off willy-nilly on some of these programs that they come up with that end up just costing, they're money pits is what they become. Right. So, but I can't. And I fully expect my elected representatives to be a little more savvy when it comes to dealing with taxpayers' money. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed I was swiping. There's a fly all of a sudden. Where did this fly come from? And it landed on my forehead. I don't know if you could see it, but it landed on my forehead. The hell. Anyway, Joe got back to us. Let's go to Joe. And looks like he got his issue resolved.
He did. Okay.
Yeah. Thumbs up. But really, I guess we better be careful, Eddie, because tax time is not that far away, unfortunately, and they could be making notes, taking
That's true. That's true.
First thing, we're going to be called for an audit.
Yeah, and they're going to find out who Joe is and where he lives, and they're going to take him. It's going to take him 2 years to resolve his problem the next time around.
Okay, so on the budget. Final thoughts. Thumbs up, thumbs down. What are your thoughts?
I'd say thumbs up 3/4 of the way. I kind of read over the highlights of the budget and the subcomponents of each budget. On the high level, I'm pretty happy of what they're targeting and attempting to do with the monies available, and without really sending us into a horrible tailspin in terms of deficit. I'm pretty happy with it. I think the components associated with strengthening our sovereignty through the military, dealing with Trump's tariffs and whatnot, I'm pretty satisfied with that being a prime target for this particular administration under Carney, and putting some significant focus on that. Whenever I see a budget come out and promises being made during campaigns, and then you kind of try to cross-correlate that to the first budgets on whether or not what they promised to do is actually going to happen, a lot of what I saw in the budget was actually spoken quite extensively during campaign time. So in that particular sense, I'm happy that he's working at delivering against most of the things he said he's going to do during his campaign, whether it's during the televised debate or just on an ongoing basis with his campaign. So I'm okay with it. Could it have covered a little bit more in terms of details as to how he's going to reduce the cost of living for Canadians here in Canada? As PP, I'm not going to say put it politely, but bluntly put it, asking people who can barely put food on their table with presenting them with more cuts. I think that was an extreme statement, but I think the message is there. I maybe hope to see a little bit more emphasis in that area. It wasn't there to my satisfaction, but like I said, anytime you present a budget, you're not going to speak in great detail on every element that the government has to deal with every day. And that's for the opposition parties to point out, like Poilievre did. I'm sure Poilievre is going to put the necessary, not Poilievre, but excuse me, Prime Minister Carney is going to put the necessary attention against the priorities of the day, the week, the month, and the year, because, like we said, someone has a ball moving down south, and things change very, very quickly. So I give him a 75 to 80, in my opinion, in terms of passing grade.
Well, I know I was sitting there yesterday and watching the budget being presented, and I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, I'm not hearing a whole lot of what's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got thinking about it, and then following some of the discussion after the budget was tabled, other people with the same line of thought is, we got a tax cut earlier this year, shortly after Carney became Prime Minister, formed government. We received a tax cut. And a number of the programs, the housing programs, have been announced, and different things like that. This budget was more of the one focusing on the actual business of government versus the people side of it.
Right.
And again, I don't have an issue with the budget as it's been presented, because I see that there is a plan, that $140 some million or $1 billion right up front. I get the plan and what they're trying to accomplish here to get us out into the world market, and even again keep working on the interprovincial trade barriers and becoming our own best customers as well. So I have to give leeway. It's not like last December in the chaos when Freeland resigned and just kind of dropped the fall economic statement off in the House and left. And it was, at 62 billion. And what do we really have to show for it at that point in time? Nothing really. A number of programs and, willy-nilly this, that, and everything else, but nothing solid. I see here, and maybe it comes back to my days of sitting upstairs in the corporate office. I see a plan here, and I can buy into it at this point in time and give Carney and the Liberals some leeway, because to me it's probably one of the best budgets that is a plan delivered since some of Harper's budgets, and going back to the days of Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin as finance minister, and some of those budgets when they tackled the deficit of the day. So I'll full marks this trip around.
But that, it's interesting too, though. It's like, if this budget was presented during the Trudeau Jr. era, exactly as you see it here, I personally would look at this and say, there's no way Trudeau's going to deliver on this. I think a lot of it has to do with having confidence in the Prime Minister and being able to A, table the budget, and B, actually carry it through to fruition as best as he could. If I saw this during the Trudeau era, in my mind, I'd say, you know what, Freeland, you did a great job producing a budget, but this is not going to happen. And that comes down to our confidence in the leaders, Gary. And I know you're going back a ways to Chrétien, you're going back a ways to Harper. I mean, when these guys presented a budget, you go, oh, okay, I've got a pretty good level of confidence that they're going to carry through on a lot of these things, right? So a lot of it has to do with Carney's character and his the leadership style, which goes to the poll that you said he's got about a 20% lead over Pierre Poilievre right now. So I think you and at least myself, I won't speak to you. I have confidence in his budget because of Carney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah.
Manel is asking, is there an update on the interprovincial trade? Nothing significant in the last little while. There, through the summer into early fall, there were a few memorandums of understanding that were signed between different provinces, and there have been some moves in that direction. Especially with the three prairie provinces. But beyond that, there's been a small agreement here, something between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, I think, and Ontario. So there are some things, but not a lot happening unless there's a hell of a lot of meetings and talking going on behind closed doors. There seems to be different focuses now because the initial tide is over, and that's what happens. Like, it's the TikTok mentality of short attention spans.
Yeah.
It was great at the point when Trump was really hammering us, but now he's too busy yakking about other things, even though we're still getting hammered by tariffs, and we've given up a lot and got nothing in return, and that part of it still kind of burns me as far as the way Carney handled it. I get to a degree where he was coming from, but I still think we should have had something in exchange for it, and we never did get it. They quietly removed most of the retaliatory tariffs, and we lost a few $1 billion of extra cash revenue coming in when they quietly removed them, trying to appease the guy. I'm still like more on the Ford side of things. You take it to a point, and then you really do have to come in with the baseball bat to the back of the bully's kneecaps and take care of business, And we didn't do that. And I don't think we'd be in the same predicament we are right now with steel and aluminum and softwood lumber if we had have taken maybe a slightly stronger stance in that area. But you know what? I wasn't in the Oval Office, thank God, meeting with him and the rest of his crew. So I don't know fully what was going on and what would bring Carney to those moves. So I can't fault him 100%, but it still burns me that we walked away with nothing. So that's that part of it. So I think for the budget, you and I are both on the same page, and we're ready to move on, and we'll just keep following what falls out over the next week. Well, they're off next week. They're not sitting next week, so they'll be back the following week, and we'll get closer to a vote on the budget, and we'll see where it goes from there. And certainly we'll be all over that for sure. Okay, so coming up, we have a prescription for trouble. But first, I want to remind you, Night Talk Canada has expanded our presence on social media. And in addition to YouTube and YouTube Shorts, as well as Facebook and Facebook Reels, we are now on Instagram and TikTok. Just look for Night Talk Canada, all one word. Leave a like and a comment on your favorite platform, and we thank you for your support.
Yes, and Gary, moving on, the Quebec government says it's about accountability and patient access. Doctors say it's about control and silence under the threat of fines. Tonight, we examine Bill 2 and what it means for the future of medicine in Quebec and Canada. Let's have a look at the bills playing a key role in this growing dispute.
Okay, Eddie, let's do that. And
Prime Minister Carney was elected having a bold mandate to bring change, to do big things in this country. And Budget 2025 will deliver on that. Today, we're delivering an investment budget. The kind of budget that will make Canada more resilient, more prosperous, that will make Canada the strongest economy.
There we go.
There we go.
All right, so let's dive into the doctor side of it. And we'll get rid of this. And we'll bring this up.
There we go.
Yep. Okay, so there are 3 bills that play into this whole dispute. One is Bill 83. And Bill 83 is an act to foster the practice of medicine in the public health and social services network. There's a lot to this. So what it does really is basically it governs new physicians in this province. It requires newly licensed doctors practice within the public system for a minimum of 5 years before becoming eligible to practice privately, like in the private clinics.
Right.
So they have to put 5 years in. Now, again, newly licensed doctors here in Quebec. It also imposes that physicians wishing to leave the public system must first obtain authorization from Santé Quebec. That's the government health entity. And it enables the Minister of Health to require medical students or residents to commit via a binding undertaking with a penalty clause to practice in Quebec after training or becoming licensed. So they're really, really putting clamps on them.
The hammer is really being dropped.
Yeah. It also includes substantial penalties for non-compliance. Now, are you ready for this? Fines can range from $20,000 to $100,000 per day, Eddie, per day, or per act or incident. Double for repeat offenses. The stated objective: strengthen the public health network by curbing physicians migrating to private practice or leaving Quebec's public system. And some critical commentary on it. Some analysts say it risks worsening physician recruitment, retention, by making the environment less attractive. Do you think?
Yeah, exactly.
Really? I could have come up with that assumption, after reading the first paragraph of this bill. I understand we have a problem. I really understand we have a problem because I don't have a family doctor. My wife doesn't have a family doctor. And, we've been here, it'll be 5 years in May.
5 years, yeah.
Yeah. Do I have any false hopes of having a family doctor sometime in the next 2 to 3, 4 years? Absolutely not.
Well, not with this type of threat that newcomers to this province, either from the outside of Quebec or from people within thinking about pursuing a career in medicine, facing this, it is not attracting. I don't think it's going to attract anyone. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to. There's going to be less attraction of anybody wanting to becoming a physician here in this province, at least. That's pretty draconian. I mean, when I saw this, like, wow.
Yeah,
oh
it's,
my.
It's just my question is, if the provincial government gets away with this, what's next, or who is next?
True.
Do they not realize how hard it is to recruit doctors? And we're competing against 9 other provinces and territories as well. And then you have, I would imagine now that the U.S. is not as attractive looking as it once was for doctors, given the current state of affairs in the country. But we're competing with other countries around the world.
Exactly. Don't forget Europe. I mean, Europe is
Yeah.
dying to have doctors over there in practices. As a matter of fact, my wife and I were in an Uber not too long ago. A fellow from the Ukraine was our chauffeur, was driving the Uber.
Mhm.
From the Ukraine. He is a dental surgeon. He practiced in France and in Belgium for 13 years. Fully licensed, fully educated, a doctor, a dentist. They won't accept him here. So, in order to eke out a living, here he is driving an Uber. His wife is also a doctor, and here in Quebec, they won't allow them to practice. Now, I know you have the Physicians Association and the Dental Association of Canada that has some impact, or the Dental Association of Quebec in terms of the numbers. But here you have two professionals wanting to conduct business, wanting to provide services in the province of Quebec. His French was absolutely real French, eloquent, well-versed French from France. And it's not a language issue. I'm sure it's not a capability issue. It's just the way things are done in this province, where we turn people away that we actually need and could use to serve the public, and people that are willing to serve the public here. Yet the red tape and whatnot prevents that from happening. Whether it's anybody in the medical profession, I don't care if it's in psychology. I don't care if it's in as a surgeon, as a family doctor, as a dental surgeon, whatever the case is. We should be welcoming these people with open arms to actually be productive members of our society here, and serving the public. Yet you get this, Gary, and you kind of shake your head and say, what on God's green earth are you trying to accomplish here? I really don't know. Is this a last ditch Legault effort to try to get some brownie points? I don't think this is the right way of going about it. I just don't get it. It's
Well,
just atrocious.
just after this hit the fan, what do I see going across a news ticker on TV? But Ford's extending a handshake to Quebec doctors, and he set up a toll-free line, 1-800 Doug, or call Doug
Yeah.
Ford or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know I was talking to someone in New Brunswick yesterday, and they have had a number of Quebec doctors inquiring about registering in the province of New Brunswick to set up practice.
Yeah.
So it's and I know some of the French language media here in Quebec and here in Montreal specifically have been in contact with New Brunswick, and I think Ontario as well, in doing an update on it. So it's just wow. So that was one bill. Bill 106, an act mainly to establish the collective responsibility and accountability of physicians with respect to improvement of access to medical services. Introduced May the 8th of this year by the provincial government, proposes to link physician compensation more directly to performance metrics, for example, patient volume, meeting government-imposed access targets. And then it introduces an automatic patient registration with a clinic and assigns a vulnerability code to each patient according to the association summary, meaning more administrative structured oversight of physicians' practice. Well, as it is now, you go to one of the clinics that you make an appointment through, Click Santé, and you go in and you're told one point to discuss in 15 minutes. How is that doctor, if they're meeting you for the first time, or even the second or third time, how are they going to get to know you and what's happening in your world that could have an impact on your health if you only have like 15 minutes basically, and then get out? You go in, you have some kind of condition on your face, And he says, or she says, oh, that's just a skin rash. And then you say, but sorry, one item. And the other item, you go back the next time with another appointment, is related to the skin rash on your face. But
Yeah,
you couldn't, that couldn't be determined. This is just totally unbelievable. And we do
Yeah.
have a comment. Let's just get this comment up here. Jen says, so there is even less hope to ever get assigned a doctor in Quebec. How many times people do we know that are forced to go private in Quebec for basic care, and now that is at risk? Without a doctor, I had to drive an hour outside of the city to be able to have an appointment at a walk-in clinic. An hour outside of the city. And it was lucky she could drive there. You know, what about people who have to Uber? That'd be
Yeah,
about
exactly.
a $60 or $100 ride, especially now with the transit strike, because they'd be in overdrive as far as the pricing is concerned. So that's the other part of the bill. And you're right, because if they can't go into the private practices, that area is going to suffer as well. You're absolutely right, Jen.
Mhm.
So, okay, so let's go into the last one, Bill 2, which was passed in October this year, passed by the Quebec provincial government using closure, limiting debate. Late October of 2025 establishes a new payment system for physicians that ties pay to access performance and bans physicians from engaging in concerted actions. For example, strikes or slowdown tactics that could affect access to care, and associated with significant protest from physicians who argue it infringes individual freedoms and worsens working conditions. These legislative moves represent a major shift in policy toward physician accountability, payment reform, and efforts to stiffen the ties between medical practice and the public health system in Quebec.
Yes.
Unbelievable what's happening here. Just unbelievable. And you had a recent encounter with the healthcare system.
Yes, I did. I had a situation where I had to go visit the emergency room a few days ago. Just to give you an idea, I was in and out in, let's say, 13 hours. Okay. My first 7 hour experience at the Centre Hospitalier Université de Montréal, CHUM, which is the French-speaking super hospital here in Montreal. First time I've visited it, and I'll tell you, the first 7 hours I was there, service was exemplary. I had seen the triage person twice. I was wheeled through the hospital for 4 tests, and I saw the doctor. At about 12:30 in the afternoon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I saw the doctor. So the first 7 hours, Gary, I have nothing to complain about in terms of the service and the real great professional care that I got. It was the other 6 hours, 6 to 7 hours, that were a problem. At about hour 8, I had asked for some more Tylenol to deal with some pain management. And the triage nurse told me that, yeah, all your tests are in. I literally waited for 6 hours for a doctor to be able to take my tests, read the results, and then give me a plan of action as to what's going to happen once I leave the emergency room. So in essence, the way I measure this is there weren't enough doctors back there in the emergency room. And get this, the wonderful doctor I saw at 1 o'clock in the afternoon was the same doctor I saw at 2 a.m. the following day, and she was still going strong. So you kind of look at this and you say, A, this is not human. B, how focused are you when you're already there 14 to 16 hours working, and you're going to have to do this again the next day? So I don't fault the professionals working in the hospitals. I don't fault the doctors. I support them 100% when they're protesting and when they're trying to make a point that healthcare is really starting to suffer because of the way the government manages healthcare in the province. So hats off to all those professionals, and for making that one doctor, that the only doctor that was available in emergency after hours. Shame on you. That is absolute I mean, I'll call that slavery. You might be being paid well, but there's no work-life balance there. Zero. How do you? I mean, an airline pilot. There are laws in place that limit him from working X hours. Never mind the week. Excuse me, X hours during the day. And once that happens, sorry, passengers are going to have to wait at the gate for 3 hours until we get another pilot. Well, you know what? Why aren't we doing the same with doctors and surgeons? Do you want a surgeon operating on you after he's been up for 36 hours?
No.
I just don't, Gary. It just flabbergasted me. So, like I said, the service was absolutely top notch. Okay, province of Quebec, and when you can actually see a professional, medical professional in the hospital for sure, I get top rated service. No question at all. It's just how long it actually takes, meaning it's a resource problem. I don't think it was an administrative issue there. I don't think it was an operating issue there. This is pure and absolute manpower management. You don't have enough people to do the work. Well, people are just going to have to wait. So, yeah, it's and it's not, Gary. I don't know. Maybe you and I are just oversimplifying this. It really isn't rocket science, is it?
No, it's not.
No.
And at least I don't think it is, Eddie. The healthcare system in this country in general, like Blanchette says, we need more money for healthcare. I'm sorry, but we're at a point now where the federal government has to step in and say, look, this is what we've been providing you, and I'm taking all of the provinces and territories together. This is what we have been providing you. We have no accountability. We do not have a standardized level of service across the country. So it doesn't matter if you're in Kelowna, BC at the Kelowna General Hospital, or you're in St. John, New Brunswick at the St. John Regional Hospital. The level of, there's a basic level of care that you will receive, and it's the same standard across the country, period. We don't have that. And we don't even have Medicare systems, like the Medicare system in New Brunswick pays a certain limit for services to other systems across the country, but it does not necessarily meet the payment that system would charge. It may be like 2/3 of the. So there's no standardization even in charges amongst themselves across the country. And at one point I heard, and that's before we moved to Quebec, or just after we moved to Quebec, where there were a lot of doctors, if you were outside of Quebec and you went to the doctor, they wanted you to pay because they didn't want to go through the hassle of putting it through Medicare through to Quebec healthcare, because it took forever to get paid. if they got paid at all, and then usually the amount was far less than what they're used to billing in their own province. Now, I don't know if that has changed. Hopefully it has. But again, it's like here in Quebec, we're putting a wall up around us and saying, "Go away. We don't want outsiders coming in."
Mm-hmm. Right.
Really, it just boggles my mind. But the federal government has to take control here, because apparently the provinces can't get their acts together and come up with some kind of a standardized level of service across the country, period.
Right.
And if they can't do it, then somebody has to take the bull by the horns. And is that not one of the federal government's responsibility? Hold the federation together. And okay, if the federation can't figure it out, then we can step in with some kind of a solution and get everybody to buy in, and away we go. But our healthcare system, for the money we're spending, there are too many levels of bureaucracy. Doesn't matter what province you go to. You start going too many levels of bureaucracy where money just filters there. It never makes it to the front lines. Never.
Yeah.
And then you've got the bean counters in those upper levels, and others running in charge of this department or that department, and they've never stepped foot into a hospital other than to get treatment. They have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. and they're running the system. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, I could go on probably for another couple of hours, but I will not bore everyone with that. I just don't get why, if we have a national healthcare program that we brag about around the world,
Hmm.
and okay, yeah, you can brag about it to a degree, but it's far from perfect. Far, far, far from perfect.
Right.
So, okay, we have a couple more comments coming in too. So let's
Hmm.
catch up here. Where are we? Okay. Here we go. Manel says, let's not wonder why emergency rooms are so full. People have nowhere else to go. And that's one of the big things at the moment.
So true.
Yep. And Joe says, I live in Greater Vancouver in the city of Delta. This year, they've had the emergency room closed on 4 separate occasions due to a lack of doctors. And that's happened in a number of small areas right across the country this year,
Yes.
especially
Yeah.
in the summer, where they've closed emergency rooms and people would have to drive, like an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours to get to an emergency room. And Joe says, some people have given up waiting in the emergency room and just gone home. Far too often that happens, Joe. Far too often that is happening. Because what's the point?
Yeah.
You're going to be, it's like you're just another number, a lost soul. And, God love the people. It's sad. It really is sad. So anyhow, and as you can imagine, the 2 major physician associations, they are not happy about it. And I think we're probably, Eddie, going to see in the next couple of weeks, like some major pushback from those associations
Hmm.
representing specialists and your family physicians, doctors, and such. We're going to see some major pushback, and unfortunately, it's also going to mean that we're going to lose some of those doctors before Legault wakes up to what's happening here.
And rightly so. These organizations, I think we had said it was the FMOQ representing family doctors, and as well as the FMSQ, which represents specialists and physicians in 59 specialties in 36 affiliated associations.
Right.
You know what? Rightly so. They have to band together and really drive some form of protest. And if I'm not mistaken, Gary, some of these new bills, some of the, I think Bill 2, there's some provision in there which restricts medical professionals from, I'm not sure if it's protesting or from or making some sort of labor action in terms of walkouts or work to rule. I mean, I think the Quebec government is even going as far as banning them from doing so. And what does that mean? It's going to ban you from speaking out against the government policies as well. So it just seems to me it's a snowball that's just getting dirtier and dirtier and dirtier as it rolls down the hill. And you know what? I'd love for some reporter to ask the Minister of Health or Premier Legault and ask them point bluntly, why do you think a doctor would want to work in Quebec? I mean, that's
exactly.
that's as simple a question that can be asked of the Premier and his health minister. Why do you think a doctor would want to work in Quebec? You know what? They're going to fumble their words because right now there really isn't anything. Like what? Just like any other position within, you're going for a job, right? Like, why would somebody want to work for this company? Well, you do your research, you understand what the company does. Does it match what you like to do? Is the salary remunerative? Do you have a quality of life? What's in it for me? Well, a doctor has asked himself that question too, especially after years and years and years of toiling in learning and going to school, going to university, practicing as a resident, putting in your 90 hours a week, and then to be faced with what? Oh, I have to work in the public system for 5 years, and you're sending me out where? To Chibougamau someplace, and I got to work out there for how many years before I can do what I want? not very attractive, Gary. I'd be hard pressed about becoming a doctor here in Quebec myself if that was something I wanted to do as a passion. It's
Yeah.
just mine. I don't have words, Gary, my friend. I just don't have words for this anymore, and it's getting frustrating. And I
No.
feel for these doctors. I mean, I know you know doctors by profession. Your brother. We have some friends that are in the medical industry, in the medical profession, and they're all struggling, and they're all saying the same thing. I recently saw one on social media, a relative of ours out in Joliet protesting with his kids with a whole bunch of other doctors. I mean, when was the last time you actually saw doctors on the picket lines? Nurses we see often, but doctors, holy smokes, man, that just says something for the sorry state of the health system here, at least in the province of Quebec. I've never seen that, doctors
No.
with placards and protest signs outside a hospital.
And the black tape over their mouths.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's
I don't
certainly
know.
something that's not going to go into any kind of a recruitment ad. Let's put it that way.
Not at all. Not at all.
No. Okay. Well, I think again that's one of those situations where we're going to be following this because I think this is going to be a powder cake for the Legault government, and it's going to blow
Certainly.
up in their face before
Certainly.
Christmas for sure. So, okay, so coming up, we have Eddie's Sports Pulse. After I remind you, if you'd like to buy us a coffee, we've made it easy for you to do so. Simply scan the QR code next to me or click the link in the description below. We do appreciate your support. And if you give me 1 second, I have one thing to do before I get in trouble. There we go. And Eddie,
Yeah.
your moment to shine is coming up because from the diamond to the gridiron, Eddie is here with the pulse of Canadian sports, a World Series classic, and the CFL playoff race tightening up. Take it away, Eddie.
Gary, I mentioned last week what a wonderful time to follow sports, and what a wonderful time for Canada this year in the sports world. I mean, Gary, what can bring a nation together uh, so quickly and so easily? There is nothing like sports on the national stage for Canadians. This has been one of these banner years. Look, the year started off with a bang in terms of U.S. rhetoric of making Canada the 51st state. It made the NHL's Nations Cup that much more important for Canada. And that was one of the first binding moments where you had Canadians of all walks of life huddling around the television sets, huddling around their laptops and their apps to watch the hockey tournament, especially the final game between Canada and the United States, which Canada beat the USA 3-2 in overtime during that final. I mean, that just brought the country together within a couple of weeks where we were all rowing in the same direction, which is really, really something to see if you take into consideration all the political elements and the discussions of separation and whatever else. It just brings everyone together. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. So that was the first experience we had this year, right? And then we went on to the Stanley Cup Finals. I'm not sure there was a cohesive let's get on board with the team representing a Canadian city being the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Final, but there was definitely a following online. And this particular situation back in June, end of May, beginning of June, the Edmonton Oilers lost Game 7 to the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup Final 2-1. Very, very close game. Brought the country together. And then we did a little piece on a show about 6 weeks ago, Gary, where, you know what, out of the blue, an entire country started supporting a sport that we rarely see on television, and that was the Women's World Cup Rugby, where
Right,
the Canadian women made it to the finals, unprecedented making it to the finals, and they lost to the English team, the English Roses. England is a powerhouse when it comes to rugby. and they lost 33-13. It was a respectable game. I watched the whole thing. And the entire country bonded around the women. I mean, what a remarkable accomplishment. And much so that it actually, England is now ranked #1 in the world in women's rugby, and Canada is now ranked #2 in the world. And the Americans are ranked #10. So it just gives you an idea of the progression of the power of women's sports in general in this country, which we talked about to great length last time around. But it's just so great to see. And, going online, going through social media to see Canadians rally behind women's rugby of all sports. So it kind of goes to show you that when there is some form of representation of Canadian athleticism or Canadian sports, it always seems to bring Canadians together very easily and very quickly. And last but not least, Gary, look, we've talked about baseball before. It's really not my preferred sport. I'll call it a pastime more than a sport, which I've equated to watching paint dry. But I'll tell you what, Gary, I, along with many, many, many Canadians who really don't follow baseball, I started following the Toronto Blue Jays. I didn't watch every game, but I'd follow them up on TSN. I'd follow up in the social media. I would watch replays for the game. My wife would actually, she usually got up before I did, would read the sports to me and say, "Hey, Eddie, the Blue Jays won last night," or "the Blue Jays lost." We both got caught up, even though we weren't baseball fans. And all of a sudden, the Toronto Blue Jays became Canada's team for the time. And that Game 7, Gary, was absolutely amazing. I mean, the game could have gone either way. Unfortunately, the Blue Jays lost a couple of great opportunities to win the game in the 8th inning and in the ninth inning and in the extra inning. They had opportunities to win it. They just couldn't muster up that extra win. And at the end of the day, they lost through a broken bat play. They had a player on first, a player on third with only one out. Inside pitch, the batter swung, cracked his bat, rolled to the second baseman, off to the first baseman. Double play, World Series over. I think Canadians in general like an underdog, regardless if it was the Toronto Blue Jays. The Toronto Blue Jays were underdogs moving into the series, Gary, every step of the way. They were underdogs in the first series against the Yankees. They beat them 3-1. They were underdogs in the American League Championships. They beat the Seattle Mariners in 7 games, 4-3, and they were underdogs in this series with Los Angeles as well. And you know what? You kind of look at the underdogs, and you look at here the Los Angeles Dodgers with a $500 million seasonal payroll, versus something that's only like 20% of that for the Toronto Blue Jays. Yet these young men managed to take these guys to 7 innings. What a wonderful run for Canada. Canada's very proud of the Toronto Blue Jays. I've heard nothing but accolades from sports stations right across the country, and comments from sports fans across the country as well, and how proud we were by the accomplishments of this wonderful baseball team. So hats off to the Toronto Blue Jays, Gary. I don't know if you had a chance to watch Game 7, but that was an absolute nail biter.
No, I actually missed it. And I'm sorry I did, because you're right, it was a nail biter. I did see some of the crowd outside. There was some guy live streaming on YouTube and walking all around the Rogers Center and everything, and the crowd that was outside and hollering, and the support that was there. It was almost magical to see it.
It certainly was, yeah. And this is the beauty of sports. It brings people together. Doesn't matter what your beliefs are. At the end of the day, there's no religion, there's no politics, there's nothing. It's just watching and jumping behind a team, especially if it's a national team, or it becomes a national team by de facto because it's the only professional Canadian team left in a final. We as Canadians just seem to bond together and support that particular team. And you know what? As a Canadian, I'm very proud that we do that. I'm not sure how other nations are behind this. I know soccer, football, soccer is a passion for most countries, and they typically rally behind their teams. But If you want to look at a multitude of sports in North America, we're always bonding behind them. And we'll think about the Toronto Raptors. See, a few seasons ago when they won the NBA championships.
Right.
Again,
Yep.
I'm not a basketball fan, but I rallied behind them because they are a Canadian team. It's just beautiful and wonderful watching Canadians bond behind a Canadian team representing either professional or a world championship. And speaking about world championships, Gary, the next thing we all have to look forward to is I'll get on to the Grey Cup in a second, but in terms of international competition, the Winter Olympics are coming up this winter, Gary, where the top people in the world in terms of Winter Olympic sports are going to be participating, and Team Canada, the NHL, is actually going to be participating in this Winter Olympics in Italy, first time in 12 years. So there's another wonderful event that I know Canadians are going to get behind, the Canadian women's hockey team and the Canadian men's hockey team. So it's a lot of good international sports coming up, and which leads me to the next big one, which is the Canadian the Canadian Grey Cup. And again, I'm going to emphasize it's the oldest and the oldest professional sport in North America, where we've got a team trophy that's being awarded, and that's the Grey Cup. And last weekend on Saturday, what a weekend of CFL football, Gary. I mean, the conference finals, the East final and West final, they both went down to the wire. In the Eastern final, the Montreal Alouettes were hosting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and in the early fourth quarter, there were only 2 points separating the teams, Gary. And at the end, the my Montreal Alouettes, actually prevailed, and they won the game 42 to 33. Congratulations, Montreal Alouettes. They are going to the Eastern final, and that's happening next week on Saturday, where the Hamilton Tiger Cats, the divisional champions, will be hosting the Montreal Alouettes for the right to go into the Grey Cup the following week. So go Owls, go. And in the Western final, you want to talk about games going down to the last wire. The BC Lions hosted the Calgary Stampeders, Gary. The game was tied 30-30 with 33 seconds left to go in the game.
Wow.
Right? British and Calgary Stampeders tied that. They made it 30-30 with 33 seconds left to go in the game with the field goal. British Columbia took possession of the ball, drove it, and they kicked the game-winning field goal with no time left on the clock. So British Columbia advances to the Western final with a 33-30 win over the Calgary Stampeders. And Gary, a lot of people ask me, Eddie, why do you prefer the CFL game over the NFL game? Number one, every game is exciting. Number two, there is a lot more football to be watched than watching NFL football for a variety of clock reasons. And I'll give you an example. Most of the time when I've watched NFL games or even NFL championship games in terms of divisional playoffs, usually by 3 minutes left on the clock, whoever's leading the game is going to win. In the CFL, you just don't know until the last play. So, exciting football this weekend. I can assure anyone who is listening to me, if you decide to watch the conference finals this coming Saturday, you will be entertained. So, just once again, we have the divisional finals. Montreal with a 10-8 record, in Hamilton, who had an 11-7 record. Winner goes to the Grey Cup the following week in Winnipeg. And out in Saskatchewan, at a 12-6 record, they'll be hosting the British Columbia Lions, who have an 11-7 record. And of course, these British Columbia Lions are one of our most favored viewers of Night Talk Canada. Joe, out in British Columbia, I know that's your team, so I'm going to say go British Columbia. So we have that stage set for this weekend on Saturday. They play at Eastern Time, 3 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. And that will lead us to the Grey Cup the following week on the 16th of November, 112 Grey Cup in Winnipeg, Gary.
And look who popped up while you were talking about that.
Here we go.
Joe.
Maybe BC.
Joe. Yeah, maybe BC versus Montreal in the Grey Cup. Go Lions, go.
That sounds like a bet for a case of Moosehead. What do you say, Joe?
There you go. Yeah. Uh, I saw some discussion just the other day. I was just scrolling through some things on Facebook, and I saw a discussion again about the CFL and some of the changes that they're making. And I'll tell you, like, seems to be a lot of people who are not in favor of these proposed changes.
No, not at all. They're
Maybe
actually
that's something we should look at soon.
I think so. I mean, most of these proposed changes really make the game head a little closer to an Americanized version of the NFL. That will kill the entertainment value, in my view, of the CFL game itself in terms of the changes they're looking at proposing. And look, I am one that's not happy. I used to have Alouette tickets. I was a 17-year season ticket holder. I was contemplating on renewing my subscription and getting back on the bandwagon of Canadian Football League games. You know what? With these changes, I don't think I'm going to do it. I really don't think I'll spend money on the CFL if they actually push these proposed changes through. And there are a lot of Facebook groups and social media groups specific to Canadian Football League, which is just a form of protest of thousands and thousands of people that are joining these Facebook pages against the CFL's proposed changes. So look, I'm hoping in this particular case, like with anything else, Gary, money talks, and that they'll back off from these proposed changes. And this all happened with this new commissioner that came in from nowhere and just proposed these changes. And it seems that they've been tabled, and I'm not sure if they've been pushed through or not. It's just too bad. It's a great game. Stick with the rules that have been in place for 112 years. you know.
Well, I saw some good points. I read some of the comments, and I got thinking, yeah, maybe we should dig into that and do a segment on that as well, because
That'd be nice. Idea.
There seems to be a very solid core of people against it, and they say the same thing you're saying, is it's just going to ruin the game, and so yeah, let's have a chat about that and see what we can pull together.
Okay.
In the meantime, just before we go, a couple of comments that either I missed or they just were slow coming in and just popped up all of a sudden. First of all, let's go back to the board here. And Joe earlier had said, I had a buddy that was sick in hospital in New Westminster at the Royal Columbian Hospital. They were so full that they had to have his bed outside the Tim Hortons kiosk in the hospital. That's just...
Oh, wow.
How does that even happen? Wow. And then Monel says, so much for all the promises Legault made of fixing the broken system. Yeah, he fixed it all right. All right, he fixed it into more broken.
Yeah.
And there's one other little parting shot here. Jen, a little bit earlier, said, obviously,
you need your producer back. Yes, I agree.
Thanks.
Oh my goodness, that's good, Jen.
So there you have it. I have thick skin. Take your best shots. And with that, we'll close off episode 58. We will continue tracking the fallout from Quebec's doctor legislation and the political drama surrounding the Carney government's budget and all the stories shaping Canada's week ahead.
And remember, if you are watching one of the replays, leave a comment and let us know what you are thinking. We want to promote that honest and unfiltered conversation, and comments plus likes help expand the audience for our stream and channel on YouTube and Facebook. I'm Eddie Tkalik. Good night.
And I'm Gary MacDonald. Night Talk Canada returns in 7 days with honest, unfiltered Canadian conversation we should be having. Good night.